Hello, and thanks for participating in this training on meeting the Green Building Ordinance. I'm Kelly Kirkland, and I work for O'Brien & Company, who has been helping the King County Green Team develop the tools to help you meet the ordinance. My background is in sustainable operations and maintenance. I'm a LEED accredited professional, and I do a lot of work on sustainability guidelines for organizations and facilities. That includes LEED certifications and Green Schools programs. I also do a lot of work related to providing trainings on sustainability and buildings. My biggest class is the Sustainable Building Advisor Program at Seattle Central Community College. The focus of our training today is on how to meet the King County Ordinance 16147. The ordinance requires the use of green building and sustainable development practices in all capital projects that the county plans, designs, constructs, remodels, renovates, and operates. And the intent of the project is to ensure that the design, construction, maintenance, and operation of any King County-owned or financed capital project is consistent with the latest green building and sustainable development practices. It's easier to see how the ordinance directly impacts your work with a timeline. The Green Building Initiative started in 2001 with an executive order, which was replaced by an ordinance in 2005. In 2008, the county bolstered its objectives and adopted the Green Building and Sustainable Development Ordinance 16147. The goals of the ordinance are to encourage green building and sustainable development practices in all King County capital projects. It directs county departments to incorporate the use of the LEED rating system, and it establishes a green building team to provide education and guidance to county departments. The ordinance also directed the King County Green Building Team to develop written guidelines, so that's what they've done. That element is the main focus of today's training. The ordinance covers all King County-owned and financed projects. It requires that all eligible projects achieve the LEED Gold certification, and that all capital projects that are not eligible to achieve LEED incorporate cost-effective green practices using a county-developed scorecard. The final goal here is to have all King County projects meeting the ordinance to protect environmental and human health. FMD has already done a great job of incorporating sustainability into all kinds of projects, buildings, infrastructure, and other kinds of development. We'll look more at some case studies later. I think it's important to emphasize before we get into the nitty-gritty that the ordinance requirements are similar to what you are already doing on your capital projects. The documentation requirement is a great way to show off the work FMD and the county is doing, receive credit for it, and celebrate the successes. So, what does it require from you specifically? 1. That project managers get some training in green building practices. Good news, this counts. 2. That you use green building techniques on your projects, which you're probably doing already. And 3. That each project report so that the county can compile information on each division's green practices and the county as a whole. So, you've got the training, you've got the green projects. Now how do you decide which process to use? Use this flowchart for each project to decide. For projects that only have an energy efficiency or renewable energy component, the only reporting requirement is that you conduct a life cycle cost analysis and fill out the annual reporting form, which we'll talk about later. If your project is more than just energy, go to the next rectangle. If the project is eligible for a LEED rating, you'll need to use that rating system and earn LEED Gold. Generally, new construction projects and major remodels of more than 5,000 square feet of occupied or conditioned space are eligible for a LEED rating. However, there are some other minimum eligibility requirements, so make sure to get this clearly resolved before you proceed. If your project is not LEED eligible, that's where the scorecard comes in. We're going to spend the rest of this presentation focusing on the scorecard. So where is the scorecard? It's in this guidelines document, which you will definitely need to be familiar with in order to successfully meet the requirements. These bullets are from the table of contents, so I'm not going to read every one, but here are some highlights that will be particularly useful to you. There is more information about how to define a LEED eligible versus non-LEED eligible project. There's a description of the reporting requirements and a whole section on how to use the guidelines. Then, the next big section of the document is the implementation guide, which gives you specific information about each of the credits. It includes the intent of the credit, the requirements to complete it, additional guidance, examples from all departments of King County projects that have used that strategy, and additional resources. Anytime you have a question about a credit, this is the first place to look. Don't forget to check the appendix too. That's where you'll find the actual scorecard itself, the documentation checklist, and reporting forms. You'll want to keep the guidelines handy. You can download the guidelines as a PDF document from the website listed above. In addition, the complete Scorecard implementation guide, that part that describes in more detail each of the credits, is also available in an interactive online format. You can select a category from the drop-down menu, and then expand the information about the credit you want to see. Let's talk some more about the scorecard itself. It's located in Appendix A of the guidelines, or you can download it alone. Each black heading is a category with a list of credits underneath. This is a close-up of the prerequisites category. Before we look at some of the specific credits in detail, I want to show you something important about the scorecard. Based on your project type, you may not be able to meet all of the prerequisites because they don't apply. For example, let's say you're doing a renovation of a space that doesn't have any kind of water fixtures. All you have to do is write NA on the box on the scorecard, and you will not be penalized for not achieving that prerequisite or credit. To rate your project, you take the total number of points and subtract the number that were not applicable to your project. Then you divide the number of points you did earn out of the available points to get a percentage. In this example, the project had 11 NAs, so their total number of available points is 44. If they earn 27 out of 44, they'll earn 61.4% of the total possible points for that project. All projects get rated by the percentages shown above, so 61.4% would earn a gold rating. So you're doing great. You've used the guidelines and the scorecard to rate your project. Now, whom do you have to notify? Here's the overall reporting process. At 30% of design development, you should submit your scorecard to the King County Green Building Team Rep. Who is the rep for your department? Check Appendix E of the guidelines document. Each division has an assigned contact. Then, at project completion, you'll submit the scorecard and, depending on the credits you pursue, the documentation checklist to that same person. Annually, by January 31st of each year, you'll also need to complete the annual reporting forms and send them to your division director. That will allow them to compile all the projects and send a summary to the Green Building team. Now I would like to mention the documentation checklist. You can find it under Appendix B. The purpose of this list is to help you identify and organize the supporting documentation for each prerequisite and credit you attempt on your project. As you just heard, it is not always required that you fill it out. It depends on which credits you decide to pursue. You can earn 1 point for completing the documentation checklist. We'll talk more about that later. What's important to note here is that there's more information about each credit with respect to the data you may want to collect and the forms, reports, or other supporting documentation. This is an excerpt of the documentation checklist, a close-up of the category for Preserve and Maintain Natural Site Amenities. Let's say you were pursuing Essay Credit 6 and wanted to document compliance. You'd mark Y for Yes in the far left-hand column, and then attach the documentation required. So what you'd actually submit at project completion is the scorecard to show what you've done, the documentation checklist, which basically works like a cover page for all of your supporting information, and then the documentation for the specific credits. The final form, which needs to be submitted for all projects, is the annual reporting form. The purpose of this form is to help your department head combine all the project results and submit them to the Green Team. It asks for information like the name and location of your project, a brief description, phase, completion date, square footage, etc. Then it asks you to describe some of the green features of the project, to estimate the greenhouse gas emissions saved, construction materials recycled, etc. Be sure you review this form before you start your project so you know what kind of information you'll need to collect along the way. The completed annual reporting form is due by January 31st. Send these forms to your Green Building team lead. When all the reports have been compiled, that information is published into an annual Green Building Program report. That's why it's so important for you to diligently document via the scorecard and the annual report, so the Green Building team can make sure you get the recognition you deserve. Okay, now we're going to look even deeper at the scorecard itself and the things you might actually do on your projects to meet the ordinance. The scorecard is organized into categories. The first category is called Required Elements. These are things that you must do if they are applicable to your project. The rest of the categories are made up of credits. These are all your options. If the credit is applicable and you choose to do it, you will get 1 point. The number of points you see on the right are the total number available in each category. Now we're going to look at each category and then look at one example credit from that category. Okay, so the prerequisites. It's important to reiterate again that you have to do all the ones that apply to your project, but if they don't apply, just write NA. We don't have time to go into detail on every single required element, but let's take a closer look at the very first one. The first required element is holding an eco-charrette. What's an eco-charrette? It's a workshop where the project team gets together with stakeholders and identifies environmental goals for the project. The intent, and this information is right there in the guidelines, is to educate participants about environmental practices and to begin a collaborative approach that can help those environmental goals be integrated throughout a project. Because the decisions are made early, they are more cost-effective. Here's an example of a project that's already done this. Parks was planning to build a new central maintenance facility shop and administration building. The building was designed to accommodate office areas, locker rooms and lunchrooms, training and conference space, warehouse space for dry goods, designated shop space for crafts, plus covered vehicle and equipment storage. The project team held an eco-charrette in the early planning phases of building. You're looking at the cover page of the report that summarizes their workshop. If this project wanted to meet the ordinance requirement, they would have marked yes on the scorecard and sent it in at 30% DDs. Then they would have sent in the final scorecard at project completion. If they wanted to earn points for doing the documentation checklist, they would have attached their charrette report as evidence of the workshop. Now we're looking at the first category that is made up of credits you can earn. This category is important because many of the decisions made during planning affect the type and impact of the green building choices available to the project. Again, since we don't have time to talk about each one, we're going to move to an example. But before we move on, let's say you didn't know what integrative design means. How would you find out? Check the guidelines document. One example of a project that made an effort to do some good planning is the DJA Protection Order Office. This office used a prefabricated ethos system by Herman Miller to allow them to install the office quickly and efficiently. The individual furniture pieces can be easily modified when they need to redesign in the future and can also be modified to accommodate ergonomic and ADA issues of changing staff. To document compliance with this credit, the only information that needs to be submitted is a list of prefabricated elements used. The next category is about best management practices in the construction phase of a project. This is one area that is really well dialed in on most King County projects already, so these requirements will be familiar to you. The purpose of most of the credits is to conserve natural resources and improve indoor air quality. Here's an example. At the Lake Geneva Park Play Area Rehab Project, the project team spent an extra day reconstructing the playground equipment. The playground structures were collected by the Restore to sell, the remaining concrete and steel were recycled, and the wood chips were reused. The team diverted well over 80% of the construction waste from the landfill. To earn points for this type of project on the scorecard, you need to do a construction waste management plan for your project, and make sure to talk about potential reuse opportunities on that site or at other projects. This credit is actually broken into 3 credits and points, so the higher recycling rate you achieve, the more points you can earn. Refer to your scorecard to see how this works. The next category is called Preserve and Maintain Natural Site Amenities. Again, these credits are probably all very familiar to you, and some are things you're likely already doing on your projects. Let's look at a specific example. The Sioux Creek Trail Phase 4 was the construction of a new non-motorized transportation corridor, a 1.2-mile-long regional trail. The project also included the construction of a 15-car parking lot. The scope of the work included invasive plant removal in the adjacent wetland and restoration with native plant material. This project could have qualified for SA Credit 3, Retain or Create Open Space and Corridors. Other strategies they could have used to achieve this credit include specifically designing opportunities for wildlife to cross major transportation corridors without interfering with traffic, or coordinate crossings with natural corridors and hydrological flows to preserve existing migration paths. To document compliance with this credit, they need to collect data on the % open space and corridors on the project and attach a site plan with any no-build buffer zones denoted. Now let's talk about social benefit. This category accounts for the positive impacts that your projects have on the community. It acknowledges your work to enhance or create an amenity for the public or a way that you've helped achieve a division-specific goal relating to the benefits for the surrounding community. Let's look at a sample project. FMD has built lots of trails projects, including the Marymore Connector Trail, which is pictured here. Trails projects can serve as public amenities all along their path and provide connections to disadvantaged communities that have been historically underserved by non-motorized transportation facilities. To document compliance with this credit, all that is required is a narrative description of the public amenity. And now we're to the energy category. Remember that if your project only deals with energy efficiency improvements, you only need to do a life cycle cost analysis and the annual reporting. While you do not need to do any of the specific credits listed here, they might serve as a good list of ideas for your project. Some specific strategies are rewarded in this category, but you can also earn points just for reducing energy use overall, no matter how you get there. On the MRJC's detention building, the team replaced HVAC equipment, including new supply and exhaust fan motors, variable frequency drives, and heat wheels. These efforts saved over 700,000 kilowatt hours and $55,000 a year in electricity, plus more than 50,000 therms and $52,000 per year in natural gas. On top of that, the new equipment saved $2,000 a year in operational efficiencies. This project would need to calculate the percent savings in order to document compliance with the ordinance, and they would attach their energy calculations as supporting documentation. The water management category deals with protecting water quality and conserving water, primarily outdoors. Remember that indoor water conservation via low-flow fixtures is covered as a prerequisite of any project. This is another case where there's a range of performance on some of the credits. The first one covers treating 50 to 100% of the stormwater on site. This is actually 3 credits worth 1 point each, just like the energy credit. You can earn up to 3 points managing stormwater on site. Steve Cox Memorial Park used low-impact development techniques to manage stormwater through the use of rain gardens. If they wanted to document compliance with this credit, they need to show the percent of stormwater that was treated on site and submit a list of LID techniques used. The sustainable materials category has the most points in it, up to 10, so it's worth careful consideration on every project. There are no specific products you must use, but the category includes some product certifications or other criteria that help you narrow your options. Here's a good example. The White Center Public Health WIC counter remodel project was a fairly small renovation. They used zero VOC paint, salvaged casework, bio-based tile, FSC certified wood, and formaldehyde-free MDF. These materials have important indoor air quality impacts and/or use fewer natural resources when they're manufactured. If this project wanted to document compliance with the Green Building Ordinance, they would use their scorecard to see if they met the specific thresholds. They would have to ask themselves, did we use more than 10% high recycled content products? Where did our materials come from? Did we get them from under 500 miles? Of course, they'd really ask themselves these questions before the project started, at their eco-charrette, so they'd know which credits they'd be eligible for. Then, at the end of the project, they'd just need to pull a list of products with their location information or recycled content information, etc. Finally, we arrive at the last category, enhanced performance. These are like bonus credits for going above and beyond in other areas. The first 3 are awarded for reporting on the performance of some of the prerequisites 1 year after the project is completed. This information is very valuable to the King County Green Team in assessing the impact of the ordinance, so I really hope some of you will make it a priority to do this. You can also report on the performance of any credit. This could be a good vehicle for you to share your experience with, for example, a new recycled content product. Maybe it didn't hold up as well as you expected, or maybe it worked better than expected. This is a great way for you to share feedback. The other really important credit to note on this list is Submit Supporting Documentation. This is where that documentation checklist comes in. As we saw earlier, that checklist describes the types of data and documentation that is acceptable for each credit. This information would be submitted at project completion with the final scorecard. So now we've reviewed the scorecard. As we went through it, you saw that some of the credits were very similar to LEED. In general, the 2 rating systems have a few other things in common and a few other differences worth mentioning. Let's start with what they have in common. They are both rating systems made up of a list of prerequisites and credits, and they both reward sustainability actions throughout the process of design, construction, and occupancy. However, the differences are important too. The King County Scorecard was developed locally, and LEED is a national program. The King County Scorecard is applicable to buildings and infrastructure projects, whereas LEED only applies to buildings. The King County Scorecard makes each credit worth exactly 1 point for simplicity. And the King County Scorecard has a special option to allow you to eliminate the not applicable credits before determining your score. LEED requires you to complete every prerequisite, always, and your final rating depends on the total number of points you earn, not a percentage. Although we've been talking about some very specific requirements in this training, it's important to remember that your basic steps will be the same on any project. You'll use a green approach from the start, using the rating system that is most applicable. You'll complete whatever reporting and documentation requirements that rating system dictates. You'll make great use of the many available resources, including those produced by your green team. And we hope you'll provide them with feedback about what is and isn't working for you so they can continue to refine the process. The hope is that using these rating systems will help you do better projects, ones that are healthier for the environment and people, facilitate innovation while supporting King County's environmental policies, and hopefully also increase funding competitiveness when it comes time to make projects happen. But let's end with a reality check. This is a relatively new process with a really wide variety of project types, each of which brings a new challenge for applying the scorecard. The green team is also working out some procedural details. In the near term, no one will be policing these credits. We trust project managers to do the best they can. The team will also work to clarify the credits as questions come in on a case-by-case basis. To the extent that different divisions have their own unique needs, there may be additional scorecard modifications, either globally or for specific divisions. The Wastewater Treatment Division's scorecard is included in the guidance document as an example for that reason. That's why your input is so important in making this work and being successful. There are a lot of resources to help you implement the ordinance. Please contact the Green Building team anytime you need assistance. Thank you for your attention and good luck on your next project.